Hey BookTube, it's been a long time since I've given a reading wrap-up, so I figured that's what I would do. I would show you the last 10 books that I have read, and show you what I've been currently reading and what I want to read going forward. And just to explain my absence on BookTube, my reading life has been thrown into chaos. That was long expected. I have finished my education degree and been looking for a job, got hired, and now I know where I'm going to be teaching the next September, which is when here in Canada our school year starts. So I've got a lot on my plate, and I found that it's very hard to juggle reading with my other priorities when it comes to teaching and education. So when I was doing my last practicum, I was teaching for most of the day. I didn't have a full schedule, but I was teaching for at least 3 classes out of 4, which is what teachers around here teach if you're in high school. And so I was teaching almost a full day of classes. Then I would get home, I would have maybe an hour or two to relax, have a bite to eat, and then you'd spend the rest of the evening preparing for the next day. And that seems to be just the course of things when you're starting out. And I have not had the will to do a lot of reading during that time. I did get reading done. I always have a book or two on the go, but it depends on what kind of book it is I'm reading at the time, whether or not I'm going to actually make the time to read it when I'm exhausted from standing on my feet all day and just, being in school. So my reading has been very slow this year. Last year I had the best reading year I've ever had. This year is certainly not going to look like that at all. So the last 10 books I've read probably go back to March, I think. So 10 books all the way from March is not a big accomplishment, but I read slowly just to begin with, and I'm very pleased with what I've read for the most part, and so I wanted to talk to them a little bit on camera and just see what you think. So the first book I'm going to talk about is on my e-reader here. It's Why Read by Mark Edmondson, and this is a shorter book. It's like 200 pages or so, and it's him. The subtitle here is The Uses and Abuses of Literature for Life, and this book is the best defense I've ever heard of for a liberal education. So basically, a liberal education is like teaching for freedom, or a sort of democratic type of education where you read the great books of your heritage, so like the Western canon, and you learn from them, and you gain knowledge and insight into basically the background of ideas and the formative ideas and the formative works of literature that have inspired our current contemporary culture. And I think he gives the best book, or the best defense I've ever read about why read in general, not even just to read as part of a liberal education, but why read just in general. And of course the obvious answer is for entertainment, but we can get entertainment from anywhere. You can get entertainment from, movies or video games or TV shows or any kind of entertainment. There's something out there for you. But why read? Why specifically the entertainment of reading when it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, you're putting a lot of investment into a book that would be a lot shorter than if you were to watch a movie or even binge a series. And his answer here, I just wanted to read a quote or two to you about what I really liked about his answer and what I appreciated about it. So here's a quote here. The function of a liberal arts education is to use major works of art and intellect to influence one's final narrative, both in capitals, one's outermost circle of commitments. A liberal education uses books to rejuvenate, reaffirm, replenish, revise, overwhelm, replace, and in some cases, alas, even help begin to generate the web of words that we're defined by. And then further down, he says, I believe that almost anyone who has the opportunity to enjoy almost anyone who has the opportunity to enjoy a liberal education, and such educations are not only to be had in schools. The world is full of farmers, tradesmen, mechanics, lawyers, and up to some crucial moment, layabouts who've used books to turn their lives around. Almost anyone is likely to be able to cultivate the power to look skeptically at his own life and values and consider adopting new ones. This ability to expand one's orbits is central to the health of a democracy. And that's his central claim of this book, and he goes on substantiating it in about 200 pages, which is really good. Really well done. I found it convincing. I always find just the idea in general, like, why should we read? It's very difficult for me to articulate why, because I've always been a reader ever since I was a kid, and it's been so much part of my life that you don't really know what you would do without it. And so for me, it's just an essential part of my being. But like, why should a kid who's in grade 9 or grade 10, who's played video games and scrolled on Instagram their whole life, why should they read? Well, books like this really help clarify my thoughts, and so I was really appreciative of it, even though I don't always agree with everything that he says. And I think that it can be pretty hokey at times when you think, we should read because it makes us better people. I think that can get kind of hokey at times, so I do take those responses with a grain of salt, because you do always have to come back to at least to reading as a form of entertainment, but also as a way of flexing your mind, of exercising your mind. And I think that's what makes reading so enjoyable, I think, in my experience. This author has 2 other books in this series. He's a book called Why Write, and then another book called Why Teach, which are books that I really do want to get my hands on now after having read this book by him. So the next book that I ended up reading is very different. It's a novel. I'm just pulling it up here on my e-reader just to show you. I do like to supplement my reading with lighter reads. Like I said, reading is ultimately for enjoyment. And so the next book I read is a thriller, and it's by Greg Hurwitz. It's called The Survivor. And the subtitle here is No Matter How High the Odds, He Is the Survivor. And this book is just a one-off thriller. It's not part of a major series or any kind of reoccurring character. And thank goodness the main character is not part of the CIA or some ex-CIA agent or anything like that. He is ex-military, but it's not played as a strength. It is a strength. It does, of course, help him kill the bad guys, but it is not something he's necessarily proud of, and it's scarred him quite deeply, the character. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. But we follow Nick. I believe his name is Nick. And the book opens with him trying to commit suicide. He's, like I said, he's an ex-military man, and he ended up losing his best friend, and the moment still haunts him, and it haunts him throughout the entire novel. Of a moment where he lacked courage, and his friend ended up doing it instead, and that action killed him, so his friend died because of his courage, and he survived because of a weak moment in the military, and it still haunts him. And it's so well done throughout this novel, how that haunts him throughout. But anyways, he's about to commit suicide. He's on the top of a building, about to throw himself off, wants to make as little mess as possible. So he aims for a dumpster, and so he crawls around the edge of a building, and he looks into the window and sees a bank robbery going on. And initially he's going to ignore it, but when he sees them harming children and harming people, like they're vicious bank robbers, they're here to kill. So he basically has nothing to lose. He doesn't care about his life, and so he switches into action and stops the bank robbers. And he kills all of them except for one, the leader, who ends up getting away. And that gets back to the boss behind this bank robbery, which is more than just a robbery for money. It was actually them looking for an essential piece of information that they did not end up getting. And so he's haunted by this mob boss, basically, throughout. And it deals very much with Nick and his strained relationship with his family, with his ex-wife and his daughter, his teenage daughter. And it's so realistic compared to other thrillers where you got basically a superhuman in this nihilistic world of corporate corruption and people who get away with anything because of their status and their money, which I'm sure does happen in real life, but not to the extent it happens in James Bourne, or not James Bourne, Jason Bourne novels, or any other thriller novel where it seems like the whole world is built through corruption, and that there's no heroism in the world except for our main character. Here it's different. Our main character isn't even that much of a hero, or at least he doesn't see himself as such. And he still struggles with his own self-worth and his own, position in life. He doesn't want to live, but he ends up finding a meaning to live in protecting his family from this mob boss. And it's a very good book. It's very entertaining. There are plot holes in here. You're gonna see through them right away. Some of the stuff just won't happen, but it's a thriller, and you get caught up in the momentum of the book. So it's no big deal. It's very entertaining, and for a thriller, it is fairly realistic. It's not just depressing all the time, which I find some thrillers can be. And I'm always entertained by them, but a depressing thriller to me is just, it leaves almost a worse taste in my mouth, and can make me quite angry. To think of the author's vision of the world. I even made a video earlier on reading the first Jason Bourne novel by Robert Ludlum. So if you want to see my thoughts on thrillers there, you can go and check that out. But moving on to the next book that I want to talk about. It is... Do I have my copy here? I have so many books out here, I'm trying to find them. So the next book I ended up reading is a physical book. It is The Old Man in the Sea, in this tie-in volume. It's got The Sun Also Rises and The Old Man in the Sea. I just read the short novella, The Old Man in the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I've read The Sun Also Rises before. It's just been a while since I've read it, and I really have no desire to go back and read it. Even though I do love this edition. I love the design. It's got the deckled edges and the French flaps here. Very young author there. And French flaps. But it's a beautiful design. But I had not read The Old Man in the Sea, and so I decided to give it a quick read. I think over a weekend I read it, and it was, easygoing. It was not particularly good. It is a lot of dude bro symbolism, I guess. For lack of a better term. It is basically an old man who struggles with a large fish. What is this fish called? A marlin? Something like that. Sort of. What is the fish called? I'm sure you're yelling it at the camera right now, but I'm not much of a... I don't know this kind of stuff a lot, so I don't know. It's whatever that fish is called. That's the fish that he catches, and he hadn't, I think for like 80 some straight days, he'd never caught a fish, and so he has really bad luck. But he goes out and he ends up catching the biggest of fishes, and it's like this huge conflict that is told so dryly, like in the classic Hemingway style, and we're supposed to infer a lot of stuff from this, significance from this. Like, it's basically the stoical man who fights against a painful world of suffering and unfairness. Because even though he catches a really good fish, the struggle isn't easy. He ends up losing the fish because part of the process is that he has to get home, and the fish is too big to fit into his boat. And so having a dead fish tied to the side of his boat as he speeds home attracts a lot of customers. and when he gets home, there's not much fish left. Spoiler alert. And uh, but he is not devastated. He's not angry or upset. He's just this stoic old man who has gone through his suffering and has experienced the worst that life can throw at him, and he's come through the other side to have a nap on his cot when he gets home. That's all there really is to it. Not all that entertaining. Not good reading. There's a lot of, I mean, if you want to be all English teacher about it and look for symbols and whatever, maybe you'll find some interesting stuff there. But I didn't find it all that interesting. It's fairly trite in my opinion. Moving on. What is the next book here? The next book is a novel I've had on my shelf for quite some time, and it's about time that I read it. But the reason why I ended up... Okay, well, I'll show you the book first before I start talking about it. It's The Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. And it's sort of science fiction in that it's about a man born with an unusually low IQ. So what would you say? Like mentally handicapped, I guess would be the old term, but even that term is not PC, I guess, anymore. But he's not a very intelligent person. They call him the R word a lot in here, because it is a book from the late 60s, but he has a medical procedure to make himself intelligent, and and the book is just written in his not his diary entries, but in his report entries, where he's reporting how his life is before the procedures with bad spelling and whatever, but then when he grows in intelligence, he has like a coming of age where he's trying to come to terms with himself, what he used to be, what he is now, and whether or not he'll stay that way. And of course, it's not as much of a spoiler to say that he does not stay that way. The procedure is not permanent, and so he descends back into who he was before. And it's just that whole process of almost like enlightenment. And so I read this because the teacher that I was shadowing, whose classes I took over for about a month for my practicum, she is a huge fan of this novel and wants to be able to teach it, but the school doesn't have enough copies for them to teach it, so she teaches a short story instead as a filler. I have not read the short story, but I did read the novel, and I could talk about it with her because it is a fascinating novel. It is so interesting as an exercise in empathy, because you have this character who sees the world in a very narrow way. He's not. Of course, he's not smart, and you can see that right away. But as his medical procedure changes him, and he becomes aware of things that he's never been aware of before, like the people he thought were his friends, the people who make him drunk and get up and dance on the table. Well, he thought they were laughing with him and that this was all fun, but turns out these were the biggest bullies who were taking advantage of him, and that they were being very mean to him. And also, one of the weirdest aspects of this book is like his sexual awakening or lack of it, because he just cannot seem to be romantically attached to the woman that he loves, and he fears her almost to a degree, and it's very Freudian for a book obviously of its time, like a book steeped in psychoanalysis, and so that's a little off-putting, but not too much, because the book is very, very complex, where you get this simple-minded character and what he becomes and how that's so different from the person he once was, where even though he gains in intelligence, he technically becomes a worse person, and people point that out to him, and he has to come to grips with that, and it's just really well done. I really, really did enjoy this quite a bit, and I think it would be an interesting novel to teach, but we'll see if I get that opportunity at some point. Okay, next is another ebook. It's a novella from this short story collection. It's called The Man Who Bridged The Man Who Bridged the Mist, and it's the novella in the short story collection by Kij Johnson, Kij, 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 and the short story collection is called At the Mouth of the River of Bees. And this book here, the novella that I read, I didn't read all the short stories from here. The story is about an architect in some kind of fantasy world, and this world has this mist, these valleys that are covered with this mist, and there's all kinds of shadows and weird stuff that live down there that no one ever survives if they go in there. But the mist itself is so dense, you can actually create boats that float across it so that you can get across the mist. And the mist is almost like a water where it like ebbs and flows, but you have to be careful because if you go at the mist at particular times, the shadows can rise up and engulf you, or the mist will break away and you'll fall into a crack and basically disappear. So there's dedicated people that dedicate their lives to knowing the state of the mist and whether or not it's safe to cross, whether it's goods or people. And the main character is an architect who's been hired to bridge this mist, to put a permanent bridge that goes across it. And the bridge is full of symbolic meaning about community and about differences between places, and about staying in one place, and about moving around, because this character is an architect who works for the state. He never gets to settle down, even though he's been involved in this bridge project for years, and he's come to know the people and love the people, and they've put their blood, sweat, and tears into this bridge, and he's put all his intellect and blood, sweat, and tears into this bridge, and he comes to care for some of the characters very much, but he has to move on, and they have to stay put. And one of the characters, of course, is someone whose job was to bridge the mist, or to row across the mist. And so if there's a bridge, what does that do to her job? And she's so almost spiritually in tune with this mist that to bridge it is to all of a sudden take away something essential about her life. I thought it was really well done. It's very well written, and I thought the characters were quite well portrayed. But I'm still thinking about it. Well, what some of the symbols were supposed to mean, and what the overall significance of this bridge is trying to point to. But other than that, it was very entertaining, and I'm glad that I gave it a read. Okay, the next book is another physical book, a book that I don't have an e-copy or a physical copy of here. I did read it in my physical copy, but it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I did make a video of this, and so I guess I don't need to say a whole lot about it here, but that was a reread for me. It's another short book. It's a novella, and I thought it was very good to go back and read it. I actually was inspired to read it because I found a lot of parallels in here. I was reading this and I was like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Maybe not in like the ominous sense, because the novella itself is very ominous, but this book here has like a Jekyll and Hyde aspect to it, where the Charlie that we meet in the beginning versus the Charlie that we meet after the operation are two very different characters. And so I just wanted to read that short story again to see how it held up, because I remember my first time reading it, I found it very anticlimactic with two letters at the very end that are supposed to be thrilling narratives. So I didn't end up, but when I reread it, I quite enjoyed it. Stevenson is a very good writer, so I was very glad for that. Yeah, moving on to the next book that I read on my e-reader here. I read a novel by Ursula K. Le Guin called The Dispossessed. So I've read some novels from her before, I read the first 4 books in the Earthsea trilogy, Earthsea cycle, which is a cycle of about 6 books that are basically labeled as YA fantasy. And I was quite impressed by her writing. She's a good writer, but I didn't like at least half of those books. I read the first 4, and I liked them less as I furthered reading the series. So I really liked The Wizard of Earthsea. I only liked the Tombs of Atuan, I think is how you say it. Then the next 2 books, which I think Tahanu, and there's another one there, but I really disliked those books, and so I stopped, and I left the last 2 books in that series to go, and I might return to them someday. We'll see. But this is the first single science fiction book that I've read by Ursula K. Le Guin, and it was terrific. It was really well developed. It was just thrilling to read in the sense of her building of these 2 worlds. So we have these 2 worlds. Do we remember Anares, which is the desert world that our main character Shevek lives on, and then we have Uneris, which is this green world, this beautiful green world, which is basically a capitalist type world. Fill in for our own world, even though Earth kind of sort of exists as its own planet in this world here. But Anares is a moon planet that is very desert-like, and it's the main pull, I guess, is that it's an anarchist society in which very communalistic, almost communistic in a sense, but I try to avoid that word because it's charged with political ideas, and so it was very nice to read this book and realize that she's not focusing on the politics so much, even though that is a very prominent part. There is even active revolution in this world, the world of Uneris, the capitalist world, because she does a really clever exploration of these worlds, where she has Shevek, who's only known this anarchist world, this desert world, and he moves to the capitalist world, and so he's encountering this new world, which is our world, and she's criticizing the world, but yet providing a really good story. And she's also very critical of the so-called utopian type world. And so I think if you go into this book as science fiction instead of political ideology, you will get a lot more out of it, because I've seen people talk about this book where they were very put off by her portrait of these worlds because they get bogged down in the politics and in the ideology, which I can totally see, because the ideology, if you go into this with like an agenda to pick apart her utopian world, you're not going to enjoy it, because if you're, insecure enough in your own ideological beliefs where you think that she's trying to criticize your beloved capitalism, then of course you're not going to find a whole lot in here other than to criticize. And of course her world building probably isn't perfect, but I just don't care, because Shevek, a brilliant physicist in this society, is really well drawn in his loneliness and his search for values, and trying to understand his own world, but understand this foreign world and the flaws and the strengths of each of them, and come to terms with his own place in these worlds, is really well drawn. And I think she's such a smart author. I really do look forward to reading some more by Ursula K. Le Guin. So I'm very glad to have read this. The next book that I ended up reading is I'll mention the best book that I've been reading, and this was such a thrill to read. It was it's a buddy read with a friend of mine. We decided to go back, or at least, we both decided to go back and reread The Lord of the Rings. And for me, it was a full reread. For her, I think she only got through the Fellowship of the Ring. And for both of us, I guess we had very ambivalent reactions to our first read. I think for her, she did not like it at all. She didn't like the story or even the prose. The boring wandering scenes, I guess, took a huge toll, and so she stopped after the first volume. But for me, I read the whole thing back in 2022, I believe, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I didn't see the whole heft of the thing, of the book, and I knew that I didn't see it. But I still, I don't know. I don't want to say I struggled because I didn't struggle. And I was thoroughly engaged the whole way, but I just didn't. I don't think I really got it. I was just exploring this world, and I was coming to grips with the registers that Tolkien was trying to do, and I was trying to navigate the plot. And so my first read of this book was not memorable in any way. And I remember telling other people that I preferred The Hobbit. I've read The Hobbit many times, and The Hobbit is on this list, but I'll get to it in due time. But I ended up reading all 3 volumes as a reread, and it is one novel, but I read it in this mass market edition with all these movie covers, which are actually pretty nice for movie covers as they go. Originally, I read it in a 1-volume red squat paperback. It wasn't mass market, but it was like this big fat 1 volume, and I really liked that volume, and I still have it, but I preferred to read it in a different format this time, and so I read it in my 3-volume mass market set, which I really liked. These are brand new when I bought them, and they had that beautiful new smell to them, and I got to crack in their spines as you might see with this one. There we go, a little bit. But I did really crack in the spines with these, and they're quite hardy books. They will definitely stand a good reread, or many. But yeah, I was totally swept by Tolkien's world this time around. I loved these books. This was such enjoyable reading. I might make a full video on this sometime soon. I really would like to, but I might incorporate some other stuff in that book, or in that video too, as I'll show you as I go on with what I've been reading. But just to reflect a little bit on The Lord of the Rings, I just love the heft of the world, where Tolkien basically puts forward this hopeless situation of this one ring that's been found, and Sauron, the Dark Lord, is bending his will towards it and trying to grasp it to basically destroy all of Middle-earth and all that is good and beautiful. And the only hope that these good guys have is the slimmest, barest hope of walking to Mordor and destroying the ring. They don't have any hope if they keep it. They don't have any hope if they try to throw it away. The only hope, guarantee hope, is to destroy it. And it's the slimmest, most desperate hopes that you could ever imagine. It's like the slimmest, tiniest bit of hope. And the only way to keep that little sliver open, that hope, to keep that hope alive, takes all the courage, all the wisdom, all the knowledge, all the honor and duty that these great characters and then these small characters can muster. So it's not just the hobbits; it's the wizard Gandalf, it's Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, but all these other characters, King Theoden and Faramir, but also these bad characters that try to act bad, try to enact evil on the world and end up doing the opposite, like Boromir. When he fails, he sets off a chain of events that ends up helping the ring along. But then you also got Denethor and Saruman and all these great characters, these iconic characters. And the good characters are all bending their putting themselves through the most difficult, most hopeless challenges in order to keep the slimmest, barest hope alive. And I just love that idea, that the whole, and the execution of this book, and I was totally swept away. And I always remember thinking when I was reading this that I was, like, I almost couldn't read it critically, and I don't mean that in the sense that I like I couldn't just take a step back and read it critically, but I didn't want to because I was so kept swept by the narrative. I was probably reading this faster than I've read a book in a very long time. And even then, I think it took me about a month to read this, but that is a qualified month because about halfway in between, I stopped for about 5 days, and I stopped completely because I was reading too fast for my friends to keep up in the buddy read. So I wanted to keep pace together so that we could talk about the novel together, and so I kept pace. And during that 5 days where I didn't read Lord of the Rings at all, I decided to pick up The Hobbit. And this is my beautiful folio edition. As you can see, the light glinting off there. I love this edition here, where you got the dragon and the fire and all these gold marks. This edition I found used for dirt cheap, so it's got a very sun-kissed spine there. But other than that, it is a beautiful volume with original illustrations all throughout. Each chapter heading has its own illustration in it. But yeah, I decided to pick up The Hobbit during my break from Lord of the Rings. So basically not basically, in the midst of reading Lord of the Rings, I decided to read The Hobbit. And The Hobbit is a short book. It's a children's book, so the narrative flies by very quickly. It's a lot, I don't want to say more silly, but it's a lot less serious. And that made it just that much easier to be swept up in the narrative, and because it's technically the same world that we get in Lord of the Rings, it was a lot more grounding to read it this time. I think this was my third time reading The Hobbit, and so that was a wonderful read. And then I got to continue reading The Lord of the Rings, and I finished fairly quickly after that. At least quickly for my pace. Which is apparently head injury speed. But yeah, that was a lot of fun to read The Lord of the Rings, and so because, going back to The Lord of the Rings later on, I'll be discussing it a little bit more. The book I read immediately after The Lord of the Rings, or at least I was reading it alongside Lord of the Rings, but I finished it after because I went very slowly. I was reading this on and off. I've been reading, if I can get it up on my e-reader here, The Greek Way by Edith Hamilton. She's the author of the popular book on mythology, and I gotta say, I enjoy this book by her a lot more than I enjoyed the mythology book. And I'm not sure why. I think I got to appreciate her prose in this one a lot more. Because it's her just writing about Greek society and Greek literature and the Greek way of thinking, and this book I believe was written in the 40s, and but the amazing part is just how much she writes the heck out of this. She's so thoroughly immersed in the Greek way of thinking that she almost interprets it as the kind of like ideal society that she wants her society to be a part of, or to adopt, like this balance between skepticism and spirituality or meaning, and religion, and their ways of looking at religion and literature and of writing and thinking. She very much idealizes it all. She barely finds fault in the Greeks in any way, and you can almost say that she has a very anachronistic look at their society, because her praising of the Greek way seems to be like an implicit and then some at times explicit criticism of her own world. But she was writing this during the war, or right after the war, so you can understand that, and it doesn't bog down the book at all. The book is thoroughly enjoyable. Let's see if I can get a quote here, just to show you a little bit about what I mean, because usually a book with as boring title as The Greek Way would not be very interesting. But I want to prove you wrong, because I believe she deserves it. let's see. I'll read you the very last paragraph that she writes in this entire book, and it's a short book. It's like 200 pages. But this is what she writes. For 100 years, Athens was a city where the great spiritual forces that war in men's minds flowed along together in peace, law and freedom, truth and religion, beauty and goodness, the objective and the subjective. There was a truce to their eternal warfare, and the result was the balance and clarity, the harmony and completeness the word Greek has come to stand for. They saw both the sides of the paradox of truth, giving predominance to neither. And in all Greek art, there is an absence of struggle, a reconciling power, something of calm and serenity the world has yet to see again. And you can see right there, that is technically her thesis of the entire book. All these things, beauty and goodness, objective and subjective. She spends whole chapters on these topics. And so this is like her summary of what she's been talking about, and she ends the nonfiction book that way, and it's really well done. I really did enjoy this, and I'm glad to have read it. And I'm glad that she also wrote a book on the Roman way, so I look forward to reading that at some point. And so what I was mentioning before about talking about the Lord of the Rings again, I've been reading, or I've been wanting to read, other books on the subject. So I remember my university has this occasional used book sale where they sell books for fairly expensive for what a used book is. So you have to be careful about what you're buying there, or else you're going to overpay for something. And they're just used books that are usually just classics or contemporary novels, and some selective nonfiction. And at one of those sales, I found this book here. It's called Tolkien's Way by Randall Helms, and it's just this short 150-page analysis of the works of Tolkien up to this point. So this book was published in 1974, and at that point, the Silmarillion had not been published. So this does not include the Silmarillion, but includes The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Tales of Tom Bombadil. Or, is that what it's called? The Tales of Tom Bombadil? If I can get to the introduction here. The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is like a poetry collection of verse. And this book, I didn't know what to expect from this, but I was delightfully surprised because this author is very smart on his take of the works of Tolkien, and he's very knowledgeable of all of Tolkien's works, but he's also just a good writer. He's not, Edith Hamilton by any means, but he's a good, clear writer. There's no point in this where I was actually bored. Even when he was talking about stuff that I really didn't care about. Like, I didn't care about his analysis of the Adventures of Tom Bombadil. So I'm glad that was the very last chapter. But he talks about Tolkien's lecture on Beowulf, his essay on fairy stories, which none of which I've actually read, but he makes them very compelling in here, and so I'd definitely like to search those down and read them at some point. And basically developing Tolkien's creative process and how he goes from the analysis of Beowulf to writing The Hobbit and maturing in his own thoughts and ideas of about what fantasy should be, and then moving from The Hobbit to his essay on fairy stories, and then moving to The Lord of the Rings. And of course this is all jumbled together. This is not neatly chronological, but there's a direct... He makes the clear point of like an upward narrative about what Tolkien is maturing into what he thinks fantasy should be. So of course he starts off with The Hobbit, but it's very childish, and he rightfully I think criticizes The Hobbit as just a children's tale. It doesn't have a ton of deeper themes other than like the perils of growing up. Yet growing up can be worth it, or is worth it, and basically coming into your own as a person. And then the Lord of the Rings sort of follows the same themes, but in a lot deeper and more and a lot more mature register. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Even though I do love The Hobbit, for the author here only sees The Hobbit as a line of progression to the Lord of the Rings, which is the author's real love here. And it's very interesting to see, like, I mean, this is a very ugly cover, but this book came out in the 70s, and from what I can tell, it's never been reprinted since. And so just finding this used book about Tolkien's world, and written in the 70s when Tolkien himself ended up dying, which is interesting, because this book has an afterword, and it's a very short afterword, and a really good afterword too, actually. But he mentions the manuscript of this book was completed and given to the publisher just 5 days before J.R.R. Tolkien's death. And so he says it's not a complete consideration of Tolkien because he's aware that this work called the Silmarillion, can't say it, Silmarillion, is still in the works, that at some point that's going to come out. Because he knows that Tolkien was working on it, and that it's probably going to be one of the priorities to be put together as a book and published, and of course he's right. But yeah, I'll talk more about this and his ideas in my video on The Lord of the Rings, I think, if I ever end up doing that video. And then just some of the other books that I've been reading. So I've been reading The Hobbit and Philosophy. This is a collection of essays connecting The Hobbit with philosophy, or different ideas in philosophy. And it's okay. I think it's okay. Just okay. It's not particularly deep or insightful. It more or less takes very surface level approach to different philosophical ideas and approaches, and then and uses The Hobbit as a veneer to attract readers of a certain kind into philosophy. So it's like a very basic introduction to some basic philosophical ideas, using The Hobbit as an entry point. And its discussion of The Hobbit is very shallow, and its talk of philosophy can be shallow. I mean, some of them are better than others because it is an anthology of essays, so they're all different authors. So some authors are better than others, but either The Hobbit just doesn't have a whole lot that you can write about it in a critical way, which is what I was kind of hoping for this book. But yeah, it's. I mean, I'm not quite finished. I got I think 4 more essays to go, but they're just not very compelling, and they're easy to read. They're not difficult or academic or anything like that, and the font is fairly big. So I'm glad to have experienced it at least, and to at least know what it's about. But other than that, it's not something I see myself really going back to. And then just building off of this is a book I've not started yet, but I do really want to read it, and it's the Modern Critical Interpretation series by Harold Bloom, his volume on The Lord of the Rings. And so these volumes are usually for libraries, for research purposes, I guess, but where Harold Bloom and some terrified underlings at the university would curate a volume of critical essays on a work of literature. And as you can see here, there's a whole lot of these volumes out there, all from the Western canon, all the way to works of popular fantasy, like Lord of the Rings. And the reason why this volume interests me specifically is because Harold Bloom was a known critic of the Lord of the Rings, and so he has a short introductory essay, and I want to read that and see what his criticism is. I haven't read the whole thing, but I've read a little bit of it, and so he quotes a large passage, or no, he quotes a little passage here, and he says, "I'm not able to understand how a skilled and mature reader can absorb about 1,500 pages of this quaint stuff." So, how a skilled and mature reader can absorb 1,500 pages of a book that reads like the King James Bible and the Book of Mormon. But thankfully, this book is not just Harold Bloom criticizing it, though I believe not all of his books are criticisms, or at least praising it. But yeah, there is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 essays in this collection here, all about different interpretations of Lord of the Rings. And the reason why I'm pausing here, because I just realized that chapter 3, or the third essay in here, is Frodo Anti-Faust, The Lord of the Rings as Contemporary Mythology by Ronald Helms. And I just realized that that's a chapter in this book. This book here by Ronald Helms has the meat of this book is chapter. This is kind of boring. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is that exact essay. Frodo Anti-Faust, The Lord of the Rings as Contemporary Mythology. I did not notice that until this point. Anyways, this book will be a book that I'm reading next. But now that this has gone on for 50 minutes, it's completely egregious. I'm going to give it a pause. I was going to talk about books that I wanted to read going forward, but I might have to make that a different video. So I'll pause it here, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, BookTube.